It's no secret the Jets need help on their offensive line. We may need 2 offensive tackles. I want to take a look at 8 free agent offensive tackles I think the Jets should target.
Jets, Jets!
Welcome in. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, before we hop into the video, I got to thank the sponsor of the channel, SKG Tax. The New York Jets practice and play in New Jersey. This tax season, Jet fans may struggle with their state identity. If you're a fan and can't determine how to report your income, call JR the Tax Czar and address all your multi-state tax questions. Don't go on the road to another state as a wild card filer. Hire yourself a CPA to game plan and defend your home turf. Thank you so much for sponsoring the channel. Boys and girls, we got a topic I want to talk about today, and that is the 8 free agent offensive tackles that the Jets need to target this offseason. Very excited. We're going to talk a little bit about the contracts that they're going to cost, the injury history that they had, because that has been a major factor for the New York Jets offensive line. We're going to talk about some of their highlights, lowlights, all that good stuff. So before we do anything else, we got to take a look at what our cap space currently stands at. Now, from what I've seen, the Jets per over the cap are at minus $2.7 million. This is before cuts and everything, which I have no idea how it shifted to that point, because just 2 weeks ago, it was at 20 million. I don't understand. But Jason from Over the Cap released a graph that showed what each team can really do as far as restructuring contracts and create how much cap space they can create without, cutting players. So without any kind of cuts, the Jets could do a simple restructure, which means you don't need the players sign off to do this. You could just shift money around and it basically cap magic. $64.4 million if the Jets really wanted to make it stretch as far as they can without player interference, I guess. Maximum restructures, you can get up to $76.3 million. That's with player renegotiations and things like that. Not losing money, but you can gain a lot. But the cap is basically a myth, is what I've learned over this time of doing this. So I would project the Jets to be somewhere between $50 to $60 million realistically by the time we restructure contracts and cut some of our own guys. So without further ado, let's hop into our prospects. All right, so the first one up on my list is Tyron Smith, left tackle from Dallas. This guy's projected contract is going to be about 1 year, $10 million. He's kind of on a year-to-year basis. He has spent his entire career in Dallas, and I really like Tyron Smith. I think he's one of the best tackles in the game. You'll look at his overall PFFs from his entire career. They're basically always in the high 80s in terms of pass blocking. I think he was the number 2 overall pass blocker this past season. He's given up 1 sack, 18 pressures. He's a 5-time All-Pro. Lots of free agents to sign over in Dallas. So they're going to have some cap, struggles to some degree. They got a new regime possibly coming in if Mike McCarthy ends up getting canned. So it's going to be something to take a look at here. Now, as far as his age, he's 33 years old. So it's like a 7-year age difference between him and Dwayne Brown. So you're actually getting younger going to 33, which is a little wacky to kind of consider. His injury history might give you a little pause for concern because it's starting to add up at this point in his career, and I'm not particularly thrilled with it. But at 1 year, $10 million, you might be feeling a little bit more roll of the dicey with him, I think. Avulsion fracture in the left knee. God, knees always scare me with offensive linemen. So this does scare me a bit, but God, 1 year, $10 million does sound very, very attractive. The next player up I want to take a look at is Trent Brown, left tackle for the New England Patriots. He is projected to have a 2-year, $15 million contract per PFF. He's 31 years old. He's got left tackle and right tackle flexibility. He gave up 3 sacks and 17 pressures and only had 3 penalties over the course of the season. There were notes on his profile when I was going through some of the research that there was inside sources within New England that said he was habitually late and struggled to be motivated. Those are big time red flags if you're the New York Jets. You got to have guys that are self-motivated and want to actually, put in the extra effort. But he did come out and just say these are flat out false. This is not even anything correct. So I think the interview process is going to be important here to determine how you feel about Trent Brown in terms of his motivation. Now, why might he be leaving? New regime, weekend arrival here. That'd be kind of nice. I'd like to. You see a lot of interdivision type moves here. You see a lot of Jet guys go down to Miami. Maybe we can steal some Patriot guys, bring them over into New York. 2 years, $15 million ain't too bad for Trent Brown. Now, as far as his injury history is concerned, the calf strain looks to be the worst one that he's had. He missed 8 games in 2021, and he's on the injury report a halfway decent amount of times. But everything's in that low severity risk range, so I guess that makes me feel a little bit better. So Trent Brown, not a bad option for the New York Jets. We're going to stay up in New England, this time looking at right tackle Michael Onwenu. 4 years, $58 million is what he's projected. He's just coming off his rookie contract. He has right tackle, right guard flexibility. He's 26 years old, 3 sacks, 23 pressures, and 4 penalties on the season. So not crazy. There were no contract talks with him as of December. Now, that could be just because Bill Belichick was planning on leaving, and his heir was probably going to be the one that needs to make the decisions on some of this stuff. So I don't know if that's necessarily a big red flag, but maybe for him, he's like, hey, it'd at least be nice to get the ball rolling. What are we talking about here? And again, new regime. Maybe he's looking to possibly move on from there. And I love the idea of weakening a division rival. As far as his injury history, dude's got like none. He's got a sprained ankle. So 4 years, $58 million. This guy seems to be like just what the doctor ordered in terms of like injury history for the New York Jets and flexibility between guard and tackle position. This is someone I would very much like to bring in if I'm the New York Jets. Staying in-house this time, we're talking a little Mekhi Becton. PFF has his contract as 1 year, $8 million. That's really not that bad. But based on his stats this past season, it's not looking good for Mekhi. He did have an injury as of week 11 is when he got hurt. He got like a high ankle sprain or rolled up on his ankle. He had 12 sacks on the season, 6 of those given up before week 11 or through week 11, and then 6 given up in the preceding, or I guess the final few games there. He gave up 50 pressures. That is a ton of pressures. Mekhi Becton, you were a turnstile this year. This was not okay. Not okay. Did not have a great season for Mekhi Becton. This was the first year he's been healthy in a long time. So, I don't know, maybe it's just a bounce back year. Maybe you can, hope for the high upside. 1 year, $8 million is really not that bad if that's what he ends up signing for. 22 penalties on the season, though. I don't know how much injuries necessarily impact your ability to be a well-disciplined, player in the NFL. Like, are these penalties going to skew more towards holding because you're beat or because maybe some mental side of things and you're causing false starts? Maybe you're injured and you're concerned with the get off of other players. So you're trying to get that extra hop. I don't know. 22 penalties is a lot. The 2 season-ending knee injuries is definitely a major concern, and I can definitely see a situation where the Jets are looking, and Mekhi Becton are both looking maybe for a clean break here. Like we said, injury history, sprained ankle this year, avulsion fracture in the right kneecap. It's funny how it says 0 games missed. It's because he wasn't active for the beginning of the season, so he actually missed all 17 games in that particular season. But yeah, not a great injury history for Mekhi Becton. We know him well, but 1 year, $8 million to stay in the same city, it may be worth more of the gamble with Mekhi. I think I'd feel a little bit better on Mekhi if we did not retain Keith Carter. I feel like retaining Keith Carter gives me a little less hope that Mekhi is going to bounce back in year 2, but maybe that's just a poor way of thinking about that. We're going to look over at Cincinnati. We're looking at the right-hand side of the line. This is Jonah Williams, right tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals. He has been pretty solid since he's moved over to the right-hand side. His contract projection is 4 years, $64 million, so about $16 million a year. He's 26 years old, coming off his rookie contract. He started on the left-hand side, tore his ACL, I think is what it was, and then wound up moving over to the right-hand side this year. They signed Orlando Brown in the offseason, so there was a little bit of hurt feelings earlier in the offseason. He did ask for a trade, and then he kind of rescinded that. So, pros and cons there. I think he could be looking for a new start here. 8 sacks given up, 41 pressures. That's not a great number. That's only slightly better than Mekhi Becton. 7 penalties on the season. That's a whole lot better than Mekhi. That's 3 times less than Mekhi. So as far as dollars per pressure and things like that, you might be better off going with Mekhi and hoping he just bounce back. The penalties, I do like that this one's a little bit better. But this guy's injury history is definitely a lot better since coming off the ACL. He really hasn't missed all that many games. Also, it was a labrum tear. I thought it was a ACL tear. Whatever. But yeah, so Jonah Williams been relatively healthy since having that first year injury over there. Just a little bit more cap dollars to devote to him. And his PFF grades I don't know. If you're into the PFF stuff, not necessarily the best this year. Interesting player. I would have thought he'd be a little bit higher on my list, I think, than, prior to doing this little analysis here. We're going to take a look next. Germaine Ifedi, right tackle. Las Vegas Raiders. His contract is projected to be 2 years, $14.5 million. His career earnings to date are only $9.3 million. This guy hasn't been paid yet. So this is someone that I think you could attract with some dollar signs if you're the New York Jets. If you're looking to spend a little bit of money, Germaine might be the way to go. 29 years old. He's got guard and tackle flexibility. 6 sacks given up last year, 28 pressures on the season. He gave up 6 penalties. Now, the one concern I do have is that the Raiders lost their offensive line coach to the New York Giants. So I think more often than not, you see these guys kind of follow where they know players or where they know coaches. And the Giants having offensive line issues, I could see them really going after Onwenu this coming offseason. I think it's going to be a tough market for him. And at 2 years, $14 million, you could see that even creep up a little bit more if the Jets and Giants start getting in like a little bit of a bidding war. But I think you're just sort of starting to scratch the surface at a later age for him. I'm looking forward to this. He's a player that I think is a little more attractive than I had realized. And injury history-wise, he really doesn't have like that much of note. In 2020 and 2022, the only times he's been injured, he's been on the injury report 8 times his entire career. Onwenu, definitely higher on my list than I would have given thought to this. The next player that we're going to take a look at isn't necessarily a free agent, but I think he's going to become one, and that's David Bakhtiari from the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers' best friend. He's a little bit older at 32 years old and has not played a lot. He's literally played 13 games over the course of the last 3 years. He had a knee injury a few years ago that just was not able to get, I guess, worked out or figured out. He's been in a rough spot in terms of injuries from where it's been. He's a top 5 left tackle when healthy, though. That's the thing. This guy is easily the best offensive tackle when he's on the field. I shouldn't say easily. Him and Tyron Smith, both injuries to be worried about, but both top 5, top 10 left tackles in terms of on-field play. Now, he's expected to be cut. He's the $40 million cap hit against the salary cap for the Green Bay Packers. If they cut him, they save $20 million. I don't see any way that he's back in Green Bay this next year. And like I said, as far as injury history goes, he's got a whole bunch of those red lines. ACL recovery, abdominal strain, ACL, surgery rehabilitation, knee injury in 2021, knee rehabilitation 2021. So a lot of not so great things. But one thing I did see from NFL.com or GreenBayPackers.com, I forget which one had the story. They were talking about how they knew there was some type of cartilage, piece hanging off of his injury, and they didn't want to actually smooth that off or cut it off when he initially tore his ACL back in I think it was 2020 is when he did that. And then they said, oh, you know what, we'll see if this is a problem later on. Well, he wound up having tons of liquid on his knee, getting it drained all the time. And this past October, he had surgery to finally remove that part of cartilage to smooth over the bone. I think it was smooth over the bone, whatever it was. They trimmed up the cartilage, and now it's supposedly supposed to be healed. So this is kind of like a really interesting aspect, because if his knee is actually healed and you don't have to worry about the potential re-injuring of an ACL, Bakhtiari all of a sudden becomes really attractive. Now, I put down 2 years, $40 million for his cap contract projection. I don't know if that's actually factual. He's been paid about $20 million a year on average, but I think you'd have to build in contingencies for injury. If he's not on the field, he doesn't get paid. That's sort of how I would want this build. As you're on the opening day roster, you're starting. Each game you start, you get, I don't know, call it $1.1 million per game. I think I'd like to see that type of contract, so at least you protect yourself from a financial standpoint. You just have to worry about the re-injuring of things. Now, Bakhtiari has come out against MetLife's turf, so I don't know if this is super likely to happen. If Aaron comes calling, maybe Bakhtiari answers that call. Man, this is an interesting one. I don't know where he's going to end up, but I wouldn't mind Bakhtiari. I've been saying this since last year. I think if the knee is actually healed, then I'd roll the dice. But again, to put all your eggs in this basket would be a very, very worrisome thing if you're the New York Jets. I would not go all in on David Bakhtiari on a big contract that doesn't protect you against injury here. And you have to have some type of strong insurance policy if you bring him in. Now, the final one I want to look at isn't necessarily a free agent, but he's an agent For the New York Jets, that happens to be free for us because we don't have to trade for him. He's already here. And that's Elijah Vera-Tucker, right tackle, right guard, left tackle, left guard for the New York Jets. Obviously, the New York Jets want to try and keep him at one particular position. It's been very frustrating from a Jets fan perspective to see him get bumped all around the field. He was going to be an all-pro left guard. Then we move him over to right guard because we get Laken Tomlinson. And then we're like, oh, no, we have issues. Now we got to go out to left tackle, right tackle. And then he winds up getting injured each of the last 2 years. You got the torn Achilles this year. You had the torn triceps last year. Not great in terms of injury history for Elijah Vera-Tucker. I think it's something you have to be really, really concerned about. And is bumping out to offensive tackle the reason for these injuries? I'm skeptical on that. But if you're saying his arms are a little shorter, the pass rushers are coming around a lot faster than they did in college, the weight is a little bit different, so he's like dealing with more stress. Maybe that's causing some of these injuries. There's definitely some concern here, but I do think that Elijah Vera-Tucker is going to ultimately end up being the insurance policy for the New York Jets, whether they try to keep him at guard initially or they head into training camp and they have tried through free agency and the draft to address the offensive line. They get into training camp, they see what their best five are, and then Elijah Vera-Tucker slots in to what would make the most sense for the overall benefit of the team. I think tackle is where he's ultimately going to be. I think right tackle is where he's going to ultimately end up. His fifth-year option is going to be about $15.4 million. That is top 10 tackle money. There is no, fifth-year option for guards in the NFL. It's all across the offensive line. So you're going to pay a pretty penny. This is a financial hit for the New York Jets in terms of value per position. If you were to keep him at guard, he'd be one of the top highest-paid guards if you were to keep him there. It's kind of interesting. From a run game perspective, this guy is absolutely elite when he's on the field. He has, I think the Jets are averaging like 2 yards or a yard and a half more per carry from Breece Hall when he's on the field versus not on the field. And it really took until the final 3 games of the season when we had a little bit more of continuity on the offensive line where the offensive run game actually started to get going again. And again, injury history-wise, they actually didn't update this for the Achilles injury. I don't know why that wasn't on there. So there should be like a big red one at the top that said he missed 10, 12, 30, whatever, however many games it was. He tore it in Denver this past year. Triceps tears, I guess not so critical. They call it a medium-type injury severity. So I guess there's not too much risk at that. The Achilles is really the big one when you're looking at Elijah Vera-Tucker. So now that we've looked at all these potential offensive tackles, I want to take a look and rank them and how I feel the Jets should maybe approach this here. I'm going to ignore AVT. He's already on the roster, so he's not going to get a ranking here. But we're going to look at my number one. I'm going to say the tackle from New England. Onwenu. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He's the most attractive. Doesn't have a big injury history. He's young. This seems like someone that you can have on your offensive line for a good bit of time here. And worst case scenario, you kick him into guard if you had to. I think that was the positional flexibility of him. Number 2, Tyron Smith. I would roll the dice on Tyron Smith. 1 year, $10 million is a pretty attractive player to look at. Is he willing to leave Dallas? I don't know if that's going to be a thing. Dallas does seem to really like him. I could see him wanting to end his career there. The same way DeBrickashaw and Mangold ended their careers here in New York. Number 3, I would say Illuminor. Doesn't have a whole lot of injury history, could be trending up, and isn't going to cost you a crazy ton of money. I do like him a lot. Number 4, Jonah Williams. The penalties do concern me, but the health has been pretty solid since returning from that season-ending injury his rookie year. So I would like the stability that he provides. Number 5, David Bakhtiari. Injury history be damned. Top 5 offensive tackle is going to be hard to come by. If you can cross off all these little tick marks and say, hey, he's going to be all right. The injury has been solved. The procedure, if everything from the last 3 years was stemming from this one issue and it is now correct, he might slide up higher on my list if that were the case. But for right now, he's going to be number 5. Number 6 is Mekhi Becton. I think it's pretty cheap. And honestly, I could move him higher on this list from a value perspective, especially if these other guys wind up not shaking out into free agency or teams wind up resigning them. Becton does become a little bit more attractive as you go. And hopefully this is just a bounce back year for him. Number 7, Trent Brown. If you're going to have to pay him a little bit more money than Mekhi Becton, you have to look at the injury history. Mekhi Becton and Trent Brown are probably roughly 50-50 for me. The concern over lack of timely meeting attendance and motivation, maybe it's just in a losing season. This is a guy that I would have him higher on my list if I knew for a fact the rumors about him in the locker room were false. I know he's come out and said that. I don't know. He makes me a little nervous. Like, we've already got one guy that like has already had questionable, maybe motivations or dietary stuff. I could probably flip-flop Becton and Trent Brown. And honestly, man, it's interesting. There's so many different flavors of the week when it comes to the offensive tackles here. Guys, let me know your top 8. How would you want to rank these particular offensive tackles? Do you think the New York Jets have a shot at getting any of them? There's really not a whole lot of offensive tackles to speak of on the free agent market. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, go Jets.